Let me paint you a picture. Private jets, designer luggage. Champagne appears in every other Instagram story, like it's on a subscription service. A home that looks like a high-end Airbnb that a Bravo cast member would rent ironically and then post about unironically. The Darcey Silva brand is aspirational in every sense of the word. It says, I have arrived. It says, I made it out of heartbreak, out of struggle, out of the kind of personal chaos that most people wouldn't survive, and into something that looks like abundance. It says all of that loudly, consistently, and in very, very good lighting. Which is exactly why public financial records, a forensic fan community, and a source reportedly inside her business circle are now revealing is not just surprising. It is the kind of irony that makes you put your phone down, stare at the ceiling, and whisper, wait, what? And that is where we are starting today. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome, and I genuinely think you found us at the right moment, because what we are about to walk through together is one of the most layered, most revealing, and honestly most human stories to come out of the 90-day universe in a long time. This is not gossip. This is pattern recognition. This is connecting dots that have been sitting in plain sight for years, waiting for someone to draw the line between them. If you have been here before, you already know what this channel does. We don't speculate wildly. We don't fabricate drama. We read the room, we read the records, and we tell you what it all actually means. So before we go any further, this kind of breakdown is what you're here for. Do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the Tell All tapes. Turn on the notification bell, because this series on Darcey Silva is running deep, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. This is episode 40 in the series, and I promise you, the story is only getting more interesting. Now, let's get into it. The trap, and it really is a trap, elegant in its simplicity, was set the moment Darcey made the lifestyle the content. That is the fundamental tension at the center of everything we are going to talk about today. When your brand is the luxury, when the whole value proposition of your public persona is that you have built something enviable, every single thing you post becomes evidence. Every designer bag is a data point. Every vacation is a timestamp. Every treat yourself, queen caption becomes an implicit financial statement. You are, whether you intend to or not, making a continuous public argument that goes, I have the money to live this way. And audiences, particularly the kind of dedicated, detail-oriented audience that gravitates toward reality television, they listen to that argument. They believe it. And then some of them, a very particular subset of them, start fact-checking it. There is a community, and if you spend any time in 90-day fan spaces, you know exactly who I'm talking about that I can only describe as forensic enthusiasts. These are people who cross-reference cast members' public claims against publicly available records with the kind of rigor that would make an auditor nod with respect. Business registration filings, court records, property records, social media archives going back years. They're thorough in a way that is genuinely impressive and occasionally a little terrifying, depending on which side of their attention you find yourself on. Darcey Silva has been on their radar for a while now. And what they have reportedly been finding, and what lines up with information from a source described as being inside her business circle, is a picture that looks significantly different from the one being presented on Instagram. The math, as the kids say, is not matching. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting, because there is a structural problem that Darcey has created for herself that has no clean solution. I want you to really sit with this, because it is a trap of such elegant design that it is almost architectural. If she pulls back, if the luxury content starts to scale down, if she flies commercial instead of private, if the Instagram grid starts showing a more modest reality, the audience notices immediately. They have been trained to notice. Years of aspirational content have calibrated their expectations precisely, and the moment those expectations are met, the story writes itself. Comments fill up. Reddit threads get started. And the very narrative she has been trying to outrun, the financial struggle narrative, becomes the dominant story. But here's the other side of the trap. If she maintains the luxury content while the financial picture is reportedly what it is, she is doing something much more consequential than just performing for an audience. She is creating a gap between public presentation and private reality that can have very real, very serious consequences that go beyond just reputational damage. There is no clean exit from this particular room. Every door leads somewhere uncomfortable. And the reason that matters is that it's not a new room. It's a room she has been building, one aspirational post at a time, for years. Let me give you the specific financial pressures that are reportedly converging right now, because the timing, and I want to emphasize this, is what makes this particular moment so precarious. The concern is not one thing. If it were one thing, you manage one thing. You address it, you correct the course, you move on. The concern, from what has been reported and what the forensic community has pieced together, is that the financial pressure is coming from multiple directions simultaneously. And that is an entirely different category of problem. Start with House of 11. This is the fashion brand that Darcey and Stacey launched their entrepreneurial identity, their proof of concept that they were more than reality TV personalities, that they had built something real, something with commercial legs, something that could sustain them beyond whatever storyline was currently airing. The brand has had moments of genuine visibility. There have been launches, there have been celebrity connections, there has been content around it that performed well. But here is what the public record shows, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. A search of business filings in Connecticut where the business is registered reportedly revealed that House of 11 has experienced periods of administrative dissolution. For anyone not familiar with that term, administrative dissolution means that at certain points, the business was not in good standing as a registered entity with the state. It had lapsed. It had fallen out of compliance. Now, and I want to be fair here, because fairness is actually what builds credibility. Businesses go in and out of good standing for all kinds of reasons. Paperwork gets missed. Filing deadlines pass during chaotic periods. It does not automatically mean the business is fraudulent or that anyone did anything wrong. But here is what it is incompatible with: the narrative of a thriving empire. You cannot, in the same breath, be running a booming fashion empire and have your LLC in administrative dissolution. Those two things do not exist in the same timeline. One of them is true. And the business filing is a public document. Then there are the procedures. And I raise this not to be cruel. This is not about judging anyone's personal choices about their body or their appearance. That is genuinely not the point. The point is financial. Because if you have spent any time looking into what the level of cosmetic work that Darcey has visibly had done actually costs, and I mean the full picture, the procedures, the maintenance, the touch-ups, the travel to the providers she has referenced, we are talking about numbers that are genuinely substantial. And critically, these are not one-time costs. They're recurring. They're ongoing. They're a financial commitment that requires consistent, significant income to sustain. That income, based on what is publicly available and what has been reported, appears to be limited. And becoming more limited. The 90-day franchise TLC, the network, the whole ecosystem is not a guaranteed annuity. Appearing on the show does not mean you are earning life-changing money indefinitely. Spin-offs come and go. Audience interest cycles. And for a cast member who is increasingly becoming the story for reasons the network may not want to amplify, the relationship between Darcey and the franchise may be at an inflection point. Add to that what has been described as financial exposure from at least one past relationship, a situation that reportedly did not end as cleanly, financially speaking, as the edited version of events suggested. The specifics are murky, deliberately so, but the implication from people reportedly close to the situation is that there are loose ends that have financial weight. Multiple pressure points. Compressed timeline. Limited visible revenue. This is what a financial stress test looks like in real time. Let me step back from the specifics for a moment, because I think the most interesting part of this story, the part that is genuinely worth understanding, is not the numbers. It's the pattern that led to the numbers. Because here is what I have noticed after watching Darcey Silva's public arc for years, and after going through hours of footage and interviews and social content for this series. There is a consistent behavioral signature that runs through every area of her life. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Darcey consistently spends toward the life she wants rather than the life she has. Watch how this plays out in relationships. She invests emotionally, logistically, and financially in men who are not yet what she needs them to be, as if the investment itself will close the gap. Tom. Georgie. Flory in adjacent situations. The pattern in every case is the same. She is living inside a projected future version of the relationship and spending energy as if that version is already real, while the actual present version is showing her something different. Watch how it plays out in her approach to her appearance. She pursues the next result before she is finished healing from the last procedure. She is always ahead of where she currently is, reaching for a version of herself that is still becoming, rather than settling into what is already there. And reportedly watch how it plays out in finances. Spending that is calibrated to a projected income level rather than the actual current one. Lifestyle choices that make sense for the career trajectory she believes she is on, rather than the one that is currently documented. It is aspirational living in its purest, most recognizable form. And I want to be clear, I understand it. Deeply. This is not a character flaw unique to Darcey Silva. This is a very human response to having genuinely come from less. When you have built your entire identity around the idea of having made it, around the idea that you will never go back to struggling, spending sometimes becomes a way of proving that to yourself before it's fully true. It's psychological as much as it is financial. But understanding it doesn't make it less consequential. Aspirational living works beautifully, right up until the aspirational reality doesn't arrive on schedule. And then the gap between where you're spending and where you're actually earning becomes a structural problem. One that is very difficult to quietly correct when your entire public persona is built on the image the spending was designed to project. She has talked about financial struggles before. On camera. In moments that felt real, that felt vulnerable, that made audiences lean in and feel something genuine. I came from nothing. I built this myself. I know what it's like to struggle, and I will never go back there. Those are paraphrased, but if you've watched enough Darcey content, you know the emotional register I'm describing. It was compelling. It was relatable. It was the origin story that made the aspirational present feel earned, feel deserved, feel like a triumph that the audience could share in. And the audience believed it. They were supposed to. The past struggle makes the current abundance meaningful. It's the narrative architecture of every great comeback story. The problem, and this is genuinely uncomfortable, is that a story about having escaped something doesn't land the same way when the present starts rhyming with it. When the financial realities being reported right now echo the financial struggles that were supposed to be the backstory, the audience doesn't just update their understanding of the present. They start questioning the narrative of the past. They wonder, how much of the escape was real, and how much of it was also performance? That retroactive doubt is a different kind of damage, and it is very hard to walk back. There is one more layer to this that I think deserves its own moment, because it is genuinely the sharpest irony in a situation that is full of them. Darcey Silva has said, in multiple interviews and in multiple on-camera moments across the franchise, that one of her deepest values as a mother is raising her daughters to be financially independent. Do not need a man for security. To build their own thing. To be self-sufficient, powerful, capable women who understand their worth and do not compromise it for anyone. And I believe her. I genuinely do. I think that is a real value, held sincerely, rooted in real experiences she has had. The desire to model something different for her daughters than whatever she felt she had to navigate that reads as authentic. But here is the thing about modeling. Modeling is not what you say. Modeling is what you do while the cameras are on you, including the cameras that are not TV cameras. Including the ones your daughters carry in their own memories. Financial independence is not a speech. It is a practice. It is a daily reality. And if the current financial picture is what it reportedly is, what is being modeled for those daughters is not a masterclass in empowerment. It is a masterclass in the performance of empowerment, which is a very different lesson, and a much more complicated one to unlearn. So where does that leave us right now in this specific moment? The answer, honestly, is somewhere very precarious. And I don't use that word for drama. I use it because it is the accurate word for a situation in which multiple unstable elements are being balanced simultaneously, with limited visible support structure underneath them. The lifestyle content cannot sustain indefinitely on its own momentum. At some point, and financial pressure has a way of forcing this point the gap between the presented version and the documented version becomes too wide to perform across. Something forces a convergence. It could be a public filing. It could be a canceled project. It could be a property record that surfaces at the wrong moment. It could be something we haven't even seen coming yet. But something will bring the two versions of Darcey Silva, the Instagram version, and the financial document version into the same frame. And when that happens, the story that unfolds will be one of the most revealing things to emerge from the entire 90-day universe. Not because of the numbers, but because of what the numbers say about the distance between who she has been presenting herself as and who she has actually been in this chapter. We are going to get into the second half of this breakdown next, and I need you to stay with me because that is where we get into what reportedly happens next, what her options actually look like from here, what the people around her are saying, and honestly what this entire situation reveals about something much bigger than just one person's finances. But right now, before we go further, if you have watched this far and you are not subscribed to this channel yet, I need you to fix that immediately. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell. Because this channel does not do surface level. We do the work. We read the records. We connect the dots. And we do it consistently, episode after episode, series after series. The Tell-All Tapes is the only place doing this level of breakdown on the 90-day universe. And this Darcey series, 40 episodes deep, is about to enter its most significant chapter yet. Part 2 is coming. And I promise you the second half of the story is where it gets truly, genuinely unmissable. Stay right there. And now we are here, in the second half, where the story stops being about background context and starts being about what is actually happening right now, what comes next, and what this entire situation reveals about something that is genuinely bigger than one person's bank account. Because it is bigger than that. It always was. Darcey Silva's financial story is not really a story about Darcey Silva. It is a story about what reality television does to the people inside it, what it promises, what it extracts, and what it leaves behind when the cameras finally move on to someone newer and more dramatic. Darcey just happens to be the most visible, most instructive example of that story playing out in real time. And that is why this breakdown matters. So let's finish it properly. Let's talk about her support system. Because one of the things that gets overlooked in conversations about financial pressure is the question of who is actually in someone's corner when things get difficult. Not who is posting supportive comments on Instagram. Not who is tagging them in memes. Who is actually there in the room, able to provide something real. For a long time, the obvious answer for Darcey was Stacey. The twin dynamic between Darcey and Stacey Silva has been one of the most durable and genuinely affecting elements of their entire public story. The idea of two people who have been through everything together, the heartbreaks, the procedures, the cameras, the criticism, and who have always had each other as a constant. That narrative has genuine emotional truth in it. The bond is real. But here is what has quietly shifted, and I think it has shifted more significantly than the public conversation has acknowledged. Stacey is in a different chapter now. Florian is not a storyline anymore. He is a husband, a life partner, a daily reality. Stacey has her own financial ecosystem to manage, her own relationship to sustain, her own version of the future to build. And that is completely right and completely understandable. But what it means, practically speaking, is that Stacey, who was always one phone call away, always ready to be the co-pilot on whatever Darcey was navigating, is now operating from a different cockpit. Her first obligation is to her own household, as it should be, which means the twin safety net, the one that has always been there as an emotional and logistical backstop, is not what it was. Not broken, not gone, but different. And different, in a moment of genuine pressure, is significant. What about the men? What about the relationships that Darcey has poured so much of herself into, so publicly, over so many seasons? Here is the uncomfortable truth that the edit has always softened, but the pattern has always shown. Not one of the significant men in Darcey's documented public life was the stable, resource-providing partner type. Not Tom. Not Georgie. Not any of the others who cycled through in various capacities. They were compelling as television. They were emotionally active as content. But none of them were the kind of partner who shows up in a financial crisis and provides a floor. Darcey has, by design or by circumstance, and I think it is genuinely a mix of both, structured her life in a way where she is the financial engine. For her children. For the lifestyle. For the brand. For everything. She is the one keeping it all moving. And that is, in its own way, a remarkable thing. It takes a particular kind of drive and determination to hold that position. But when the engine has problems, when the revenue isn't where it needs to be, when the business filings lapse, when the cost structure is outpacing the income, there is no backup generator. There is no person or structure that kicks in and absorbs the gap. It is all on her. It has always been all on her. And right now, that weight is reportedly heavier than it has been in a long time. Now I want to talk about the 90-day franchise itself, because I think this relationship between Darcey and TLC, between her and the show that made her famous, is at a more complicated and delicate inflection point than most people are currently factoring in. Here is the reality of what the franchise relationship actually looks like from the inside, based on everything that has been reported and observed over years of covering this world. TLC and the 90-day production ecosystem are not in the business of loyalty. They're in the business of story. When your story is generating ratings, generating conversation, generating the kind of audience engagement that keeps advertisers happy you are valuable, the cameras find you. The spin-offs get greenlit. The invitations keep coming. When your story becomes complicated in ways that are difficult to shape into a coherent, marketable narrative, when the drama starts being the kind of drama that creates liability rather than entertainment, the relationship changes. It doesn't end dramatically. It doesn't end with a press release. It ends gradually, with fewer calls returned, with projects that don't quite come together, with a quiet recalibration of who is at the center of the next cycle. Darcey has had an extraordinary run with this franchise. Multiple shows. Multiple seasons. A level of platform access that very few reality personalities ever achieve. And that run is not nothing. It is genuinely impressive, and I want to acknowledge that sincerely. She built real visibility. She built a real audience. She created something out of the 90-day universe that outlasted most of her contemporaries from those early seasons. But visibility and income are not the same thing. Platform and financial security are not the same thing. And as the franchise calculates its next chapter, new casts, new couples, new drama to cycle in the question of where Darcey fits and how prominently and at what cost, is one that is reportedly being asked. Not answered definitively yet, but asked. And the asking itself is significant. Because the income that has been supporting the lifestyle, the appearance fees, the partnership deals, the content opportunities that flow from being a current and relevant franchise figure is directly tied to the answer to that question. Let me tell you something about the way financial unraveling works in public life, because I think it is an important context for understanding what we are likely to see unfold over the next several months. It rarely happens the way it does in movies. There is no single dramatic moment where everything collapses at once and the audience gets a clear before and after. Real financial unraveling is slower, messier, and more ambiguous than that. It happens in increments. Small signals that each have a plausible, innocent explanation. A vacation that gets conspicuously quieter. A product partnership that suddenly disappears from the feed. A property that moves to market at an unusual time. Content that subtly shifts away from the luxury markers that used to be central. Each individual signal can be explained away. The audience accepts the explanation because they want to. They like Darcey. They're invested in the aspirational version of her. They will extend a lot of interpretive charity to keep that version intact. But the signals accumulate. And at some point the accumulation reaches a threshold where the charitable interpretation stops being the natural one. Where the pattern is undeniable, where the question is no longer whether something is happening, but how significant it actually is. I believe based on the reporting, based on the public record, based on the behavioral pattern we have tracked across this entire series that we are approaching that threshold. Not past it yet, but approaching it. And the approach is accelerating. Here is what her actual options look like from where things currently stand. Because I think it is worth being specific about this, rather than just gesturing vaguely at the situation. Option 1. She pivots the brand. She leans into a new narrative, the reinvention, the transparency, the relatable struggle reframed as strength. There is a version of this that works. There is an audience for authentic financial vulnerability paired with genuine resilience. But pulling this off requires something that is very difficult to manufacture: actual authenticity. Audiences have spent years calibrating to the Darcey Silva brand. They can detect a performed pivot from a real one. And a performance transparency is almost worse than no transparency at all, because it confirms the thing people were already beginning to suspect, that the performance has always been the point. Option 2. She doubles down. More luxury content. Louder aspirational messaging. Larger declarations of abundance. This is the psychological path of least resistance. Double down on the identity that the pressure is threatening, rather than allowing it to be questioned. The problem with this option is that it accelerates the timeline to the convergence point we talked about in the first half. The gap between performance and reality widens faster. The landing, when it comes, is harder. Option 3. She finds a genuinely new revenue structure. A partnership, a project, a relationship, something that actually changes the underlying financial reality rather than just the way it is being presented. This is the only option that actually solves the problem rather than managing it. But it requires both an opportunity and the discipline to align the spending with the new reality during what would be a transitional period. Both of those things are harder than they sound for someone whose brand is built on the appearance of already having arrived. None of these options are easy. All of them require something. And the specific thing that all of them require in different ways is honesty with herself about what the actual situation is and what kind of life is actually sustainable on the other side of it. I want to come back one more time to the daughters, because I think this is the part of the story that cuts deepest, and I think it deserves to be said clearly. Darcey Silva is a mother first. Whatever else is true about her, whatever the financial records say, whatever the forensic community has pieced together, whatever the gap is between Instagram and reality, she has 2 daughters who are watching. Not just watching the content. Watching her. Watching how she handles pressure. Watching what she does when the story she has been telling about herself gets stress tested. Watching whether the values she has declared, independence, resilience, self-sufficiency, show up in the actual choices, or whether they stay in the realm of content. Kids are not stupid. Kids who have grown up inside a public family, who have watched their mother be documented and discussed and dissected by strangers on the internet, are especially not stupid. They understand more than they are given credit for. And the lesson that gets modeled in a moment like this one, the lesson that gets lived, not posted, is the one that actually sticks. I genuinely hope, and I mean this without irony or condescension, that the lesson they get to watch their mother learn if this situation is what it reportedly is the real one. The one about how you actually build something sustainable. About how you align what you present with what you actually have. About how genuine strength is not the performance of invulnerability, but the willingness to be honest about what is hard and to do the work required to fix it. That is a lesson worth learning. And it is a lesson, if learned publicly and authentically, that would generate more lasting audience connection than any number of luxury posts ever could. And now here's the broader point. The one this whole story has been building toward. Darcey Silva did not invent the trap she is currently in. She inherited it from the format that made her famous. Reality television, the 90-day franchise specifically, but the genre broadly operates on a fundamental lie. The lie is this: it tells the people inside it that fame is the same as financial security. That exposure is the same as income. That being known, being watched, being talked about that all of that translates into something stable, something lasting, something that can be built on. It doesn't. It never did. Fame is volatile. Exposure is attention, and attention moves constantly. Being talked about is not the same as being paid. And for people who entered this ecosystem often without significant financial resources or industry infrastructure behind them, the gap between what the fame promises and what it actually delivers can quietly become catastrophic. Darcey Silva is one of the most visible examples of this gap in the entire 90-day universe. But she is far from the only one. Cast members across seasons have chased the lifestyle that they believed their visibility entitled them to, spending ahead of income that never fully materialized, building brands on foundations that were never as solid as the content suggested. The audience watches this happen, and I think on some level, the audience knows. The fascination with financial reality content around reality stars is not purely mean-spirited. It is partly a genuine reckoning with the deal the format made with the people inside it. A belated recognition that what looked like a golden ticket was actually something more complicated and more costly. So here is where the road ends. And here is where the reckoning genuinely begins. The gap between the Darcey Silva who exists on Instagram and the Darcey Silva who exists on financial documents is real. It has been building for a long time. And it is approaching a width that cannot be performed across indefinitely. Something will force a convergence, a public record that surfaces, a project that doesn't materialize, a lifestyle that quietly contracts in ways the audience notices, something we haven't even anticipated yet. Because these things always have a forcing moment. Always. When that moment comes, and I am genuinely telling you, based on everything we have tracked across this series, that it is closer than it has ever been. The story that unfolds will be one of the most significant to come out of the 90-day universe in years. Not because of the schadenfreude. Not because the audience wanted her to fail. But because of what it reveals about the architecture of the whole enterprise, the promises it makes, the costs it conceals, and the people it leaves holding the bill. This channel will be here for every development. Every filing, every signal, every shift. We will break it down, we will put it in context, and we will do it with the rigor and the fairness that this community deserves. 40 episodes into this series. And I am telling you with complete sincerity, the most important episodes are still ahead. Here is what I need from you right now before you go anywhere. If this breakdown gave you something, if it shifted your perspective, if it connected dots you had been sensing, but couldn't quite articulate, if it made you think about the 90-day universe in a way you hadn't before, then do 3 things for me right now. Hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of work matters, that there is an audience for breakdowns that go deeper than surface-level drama. Subscribe to the Tell All tapes if you are not already subscribed. This channel is the only place in the 90-day content universe doing this level of forensic, pattern-based, genuinely sourced analysis. We are not here for gossip. We are here for the truth. And the truth, as this series has shown episode after episode, is always more interesting than the gossip. Turn on the notification bell, because part 41 of this series is already in production. And what is coming next, what we have found, what has been confirmed, what is about to become impossible to ignore is the kind of material that you will not want to find out about 3 days late from a comment section. The tell-all tapes. 40 episodes deep. And we are just getting started. See you in the next one.